This week, New York City implemented a vaccine mandate. It's not a direct mandate. It's a mandate to certain establishments that they can't allow certain people inside, people that haven't gotten the vaccine inside. So these establishments, these businesses, these companies will be held responsible if they allow people inside their venues that aren't vaccinated. This has got to be stopped. Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. First of all, as always, when I'm dealing with the vaccines, I have to state I'm not making any advice. I'm not providing any advice about not taking the vaccine. I'm not making any claims that the vaccines aren't effective. I am talking merely about the legality, the constitutionality, and the issues of how our rights are being affected by certain laws that are being advocated for, and in this case, being implemented. So in New York City, the key to New York City is now, in order to be able to go to the movies, go to gyms, go to restaurants and eat inside, you must be vaccinated. And this is the mandate that Mayor de Blasio has implemented. And a lot of people are all for it. In fact, I've spoken to people who said, oh, yes, of course. Why shouldn't people be mandated to take it? And I'm like, the first question I always ask is, wait a minute, what happened to my body, my choice? That's the first question, because as you know, New York City, as you may know, New York City is a very liberal place, Democrat, heavily Democrat. So for all of these people that are, and even Republicans in New York City are, feels differently on social issues than, let's say, Republicans in Middle America, conservatives in Middle America. So when I say my body, my choice, I'm looking at them like, what happened to that? What happened to that mantra? What happened to that belief? Why does it suddenly not apply? And that usually makes people at least take some pause, as it should. But the bigger point is, my body, my choice isn't exactly a legal argument. It's a slogan. I get it. The question is, what are the problems with the vaccine mandate? I mean, you don't have to go to the movies. You don't have to eat indoors. And in fact, that's what Mayor de Blasio said. He said, listen, if you don't want the vaccine, you can still go to a restaurant. You can still get food from a restaurant, but you just have to get it to go. That's it. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? It sounds like a minor inconvenience. But even that minor inconvenience I have a problem with, but it does get way worse. It gets way worse. What he didn't mention, and what I haven't heard reporters and almost no pushback on, is this mandate that people that are inside these establishments must be vaccinated does not just apply to customers. It also applies to employees. So people who work in restaurants, people who work in gyms, people who work in movie theaters, they either have to get vaccinated or they can no longer work in these institutions. They can no longer keep their jobs. After the absolute economic upheaval of 2020, due to lockdowns, now the government, once again, is screwing over little people, regular people that are just trying to make a living, trying to provide for their families. And once again, the government is screwing them over. Of course, people will say, well, why don't they just get the vaccine? Their body, their choice. You see, they don't have to give you an explanation. They don't owe anybody an explanation. If a person doesn't want to take any type of drug, any type of medication, any type of treatment, why is that anybody else's business? But we're dealing with people who claim to believe in that principle and are now advocating for the government to make these decisions and to use coercion to force people to either take the vaccine or suffer some significant consequences. So while not being able to go to a movie, which I like going to movies, is not that big a deal, not being able to work is a much bigger deal. And there are people who have protested, but protesting isn't going to stop this. Not alone. I think lawsuits need to be filed. So there's a group of Republicans, Nicole Maliotakis, Joe Borelli, John Tobacco. They've all signed on to a lawsuit and made an announcement that they would be filing a lawsuit this past week. I'm going to look into that, see what the grounds are, see if I think that that has a likely chance of success. But there's going to need to be more lawsuits, in my opinion. In my opinion, New York is going to have to be sued into oblivion because there are several problems with this law. And people will say, why are you so selfish? Why are you so dismissive of human life? Like, people need to take the vaccine. And I'll say, well, you might want to take a closer look at this mandate. You see, that's why I know this has to go to court, because de Blasio can get on TV and say anything he wants to. He can spin. And of course, these sorry excuses for reporters will just, in order to maintain access, ask surface level questions and allow him to just make stuff up and not seriously challenge ridiculous points. In court, there's going to have to be some answers given. But one of the interesting things you need to realize is people who are claiming that the key to New York City is about public safety. Why movie theaters? Why restaurants? Why gyms? These were not significant in being responsible for the spread of COVID. Movie theaters in New York City were shut down for like almost all of 2020. And even before they were shut down, movie theaters were enacting their own distancing. In other words, you would have to, like AMC theaters, you would go to AMC theaters, you would reserve a seat, and then the seats in the surrounding area would be blocked off. They were only operating at like 30% capacity while they were still open. And then they got shut down completely, despite the fact that on their own, they made attempts to enforce social distancing and keep people safe. So why movie theaters? Why gyms? Why restaurants? There are several exemptions to this mandate. Let's take a look at them. So we look at the exemptions, and of course you have food, off-site, to go, businesses that remove indoor seating, but then you also have residential buildings, you have office buildings, you have child care programs, you have K through 12, pre-K through 12 educational schools and programs. Senior centers are exempted. You have churches, community centers, charitable food services, and catering at someone's home. All of these are exemptions. But now, there's another part to look at this. Look at who is exempted. Okay, children under the age of 12, right? People just, in for a minimum amount of time. But then look at this one. Performing artists who do not reside in New York City and are not regularly employed by the entity. Professional athletes, member of professional sports teams who don't reside in New York City, and contractors who do not reside in New York City. Look, they have made a specific exemption for wealthy and powerful people who are just coming through so that they are exempt and that they don't have to face the same consequences, the same kind of oppressive and intrusive regulations that that a bunch of us face. Do you know why these exemptions exist? Unions. You see, the industries that staff these particular carved out exemptions are controlled by several unions, including 32BJ, SEIU. Office buildings and residential buildings, that's their wheelhouse. And they're not going for the nonsense. As well, they shouldn't, because their workers should not be forced to either put something in their body or not have jobs. 1199 SEIU, they also are not standing for the nonsense. Of course, you've got the teachers unions. You could just look at the power that they have exerted all over the country. So when you take a look at this, you realize this is not about public health. This is not about health. This is not about science. But that's why it needs to go to court. Because once it goes to court, and now let me stop and say this once again. I am not talking about the vaccine's effectiveness. I am talking about the reasons behind these laws. That's it. I'm talking about, I am not a medical doctor. I am not a virologist. I am not an expert on vaccines, nor am I offering any type of advice about opining about the efficacy of the vaccines. I am talking about the purpose of these policies. And the fact that there are so many exemptions make it clear that this is not about public health. This is about politics. This is about control. This is about power. This is not about public health. This is about power. They are doing something that they want to do because they can, because there's not enough pushback. And that's why they've chosen this group of people that they can screw over. Because the restaurant unions, if they exist, to the degree they exist, the movie theaters, gyms, they just are willing to just run right over them. But it doesn't matter whether you're in one of those unions. It doesn't matter if you work there. They will not stop. This is what the government does. The government uses something, expands its power, and then goes further. If you want to talk about giving an inch and taking a mile, government is a perfect example. But I'm looking forward to seeing lawsuits filed. I'm actually in the process of putting together something myself, because this law, this mandate, is not just bad. It's not just an infringement on people's rights. Absolutely horrible. That's why these laws absolutely cannot be allowed to stand. In fact, these mandates, because there's no purpose to them. They're not actually designed to help people. And there are better ways to actually help and protect the public that are far less intrusive. And that's what people need to be pushing back on. The government doesn't need to be forcing people to put something in their bodies that they don't feel comfortable putting in their bodies. And people should be able to respect the decisions of others to choose what they do and do not put into their bodies. That's why having the vaccines fully available to everybody who wants it allows those people that feel that they need to be protected to get the vaccine, and to allow those that feel that they're not at significant risk of COVID to choose otherwise, to make their own choices for their own bodies. And that's something we should be respecting across the board. That's something people claim to respect across the board. And the fact that fear is now driving just basic respect and consideration for others out of the window doesn't bode well for the future. As always, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. And if you disagree with me, if you think, no, this is a different situation, this is an emergency, we need to force everybody to take the vaccine, and if they don't like it, then they don't need to work. If that's what you feel, go ahead and give me the thumbs down, but state why in the comment section, and I will address it either in the comment section or in a future video. I'll see you next time.